So good morning, everyone. We're in week number 3 of a unit in which we're looking at a very famous, very important part of the Bible called the Beatitudes. Now the word Beatitudes comes from the Latin word beatus, which basically means to be happy. So the Beatitudes, in a nutshell, are Jesus' insights on how a person might live a happy life. Now, bearing in mind that Jesus was a wee bit of a hippie, his insights on happiness are probably of quite limited value to you and me, right? Here's Jesus. Doesn't earn a lot of money. His RESP isn't all that well funded. Doesn't have nice clothes. Doesn't drive a nice car. Doesn't even own a home. The things that we spend our lives trying so desperately hard to acquire and maintain, Jesus just wasn't all that interested in. So clearly his view on what happiness is and what makes a person happy will probably differ a wee bit from our own. Our feeling is that happiness is the presence of pleasure and the absence of pain. Happiness is the presence of entertainment and the absence of boredom. Happiness is the presence of security and the absence of insecurity. The relationship between a person's happiness and a person's circumstances is very deeply ingrained in our cultural psyche. And yet, regardless of how deeply ingrained that relationship is, I think that in our heart of hearts, we all know that happiness is a little bit more complex than we've been led to believe. For example, we all have the remarkable fortune of being able to live here in Canada. We are able to regularly participate in activities that we find quite pleasurable. We all have some form of entertainment that we regularly enjoy. And comparatively speaking, we all enjoy some measure of security and safety, and yet puzzlingly, we're not all happy all the time. And I think we know enough to know that an increase in our pleasure, an increase in our levels of entertainment, even an increase in our level of security, would not necessarily lead to a corresponding increase in our level of happiness. Happiness is complicated. And Jesus, the first century homeless preacher, implies that often we look for happiness in the wrong things and the wrong places. In this morning's lesson, he says to us, blessed are those, so this is this word happy, makarios in Greek. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Now, we live in a world, I suppose, where should we feel like having something to eat or something to drink, we need look no further than our large overstocked refrigerators. Our closest connection with the concept of hunger is being slightly peckish in between snacks. In first century Palestine, however, Jesus' audience were very, very closely connected with concepts like hunger and thirst. Theirs, remember, was an agrarian society on the edge of a desert. At the best of times, these people were only ever one bad harvest away from starvation. They were all too aware of what the hot desert wind could do to the throat and the dangers posed by underhydration. So when Jesus talks to these people about things like hunger and things like thirst, they're there. They're there emotionally. They're there experientially. They understand how those things feel. I suppose to help us understand, we might have to flick through the international pages of the Toronto Star. We might have to look at an image, something like this. So these are, it's a stereotypical image, children from the Horn of Africa. And you can see it in their eyes, can't you? You can see it in their body language. They're hungry. They're thirsty. They've got a look about them that says, I walked for 3 days from my home village to get to this feeding station, because if I didn't do that, I'd die of starvation, I'd die of thirst, I'd die of malnutrition, and so on. That sort of hunger is happily alien to us. I think we are, however, quite familiar with the language of hunger and the language of thirst in the context of things like ambition. So, for example, many of you know that your sporting heroes often talk about success by adopting the language of hunger. Alex Ferguson, for example, the former manager of Manchester United, the most successful soccer manager in the history of the game, coincidentally a Scot. He said in his autobiography that he sometimes lets his players go, not because they lose their skill set, but because they lose their hunger. So his view of life was that hunger is that thing that makes a person run a little bit faster and try a little bit harder. Many of you will have experienced this language when you attended one of those sales seminars. You ever been to any of those things? First session, 7:30 in the morning, there's some guy too enthusiastic to be wholesome, far too happy to be normal, and he talks about being hungry for sales and hungry for success and hungry for you to reach that next level and get those, and get that boat or whatever it is and make next year's bonus. Jesus is saying, the happy people, the people who get it, the people who understand it, the people who experience it, are the people who badly want righteousness. They are ambitious for righteousness. They have a hunger for righteousness. And they want that so badly, it makes them run a little bit faster and try a little bit harder. It is a hunger for them, a craving for them. And this is just yet another example of the teaching of Jesus just being lost on us. Right? Jesus isn't making sense right now. We hunger for things all the time. Of course we do. We want things. Most of us in this room are quite ambitious people. We want things for ourselves, we want things for our children, and many of the things that we want in life, we want rather badly. And our wanting is not the stuff of idle daydreams. We're not the sort of people who will sit on the sofa and wish that we had this or wish that we had that. Not at all. Our wanting in life is almost always accompanied by effort and industry. Our desires shape our actions every single day. That's why we work as hard as we do. That's why we study as hard as we do. That's why we take the risks that we take. We want pleasures, we want entertainments, we want securities, and we want them so badly we're willing to work very hard to get them, even exchange large parts of our lives for them. So whilst we understand the concept of hungering for things, righteousness probably isn't one of those things. Righteousness just doesn't get you up in the morning, does it? In fact, the word righteous may even arouse negative connotations. If I ask you to think about a person who is righteous, your mind will probably go to an individual who you don't like all that much. Mark Twain said, did he not, having spent a considerable amount of time with good people, I understand why Jesus liked to spend so much time with sinners. And I resonate with that because sinners tend to know who they are. Good people, at least people who are aware of their goodness, tend to be a little bit up themselves. And there's something about the word righteousness that makes your mind go there, right? There's something about the word righteousness that makes you think of a person who's up themselves, who's sickeningly pleased with how successfully they negotiate the moral and ethical rigors of the Christian life. And clearly Jesus doesn't like that kind of person either. So what on earth is he on about? Righteousness. What is righteousness? For myself, I think it's a good idea when you're talking about righteousness to get rid of the oosness and be left with the word right. Jesus is saying, I'll tell you who the happy people are. The happy people are the ones who hunger to be right, who thirst to be right. Right as in they live a right life. Right in its morality, right in its purity, right in its integrity. And then, that would be more than enough to get your head around. But right after Jesus says this little thing, he then launches into an explanation of what right looks like in a person's life. And he begins that explanation by saying this business of being right is actually very serious. He says, for I tell you that unless your rightness, that is your morality, your integrity, your purity, surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, who are disgustingly righteous, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. And then he, as if that wasn't enough, he then goes on to give 6 examples. I hate it when Jesus gives examples of what right looks like. He says, if you're living a right life, then you won't hold on to grudges. You'll let things go. You won't have any ill feelings in your life. You'll get hurt, and then that hurt will not be carried forward by you into the rest of your life. You will let things go. He says if you're living a right life, you'll be extremely disciplined in the whole area of your sexual fantasies. Why does Jesus talk about sexual fantasies? Leave it alone. He implies that your biggest sex organ is up here in your head, not down there. And being right means extremely moral in that whole private area of your life. He says if you're living a right life, you won't condone divorce just because everyone else condones divorce. You will go to any lengths to keep the promises that you once made. He says if you're living a right life, your integrity will be such that you'll be known to be the kind of person who says what he says he'll do and be where he says he'll be. Suppliers will be able to trust you to pay bills on time. Customers will trust you to be fair in your pricing and professional in your service. Old ladies will be able to trust you with their bank accounts. You'll have an unassailable integrity if you've got a right life. He says if you're living a right life, you'll never mistreat someone just because they mistreated you. He says if you're living a right life, you'll be kind to people who have been unkind to you. So, and he goes on like that. And it's horrible. It is. So when Jesus says, I want you to be righteous, it's pretty clear, pretty explicit what he means. He means, I would like for you to raise the bar an awful lot higher on your personal morality, your personal integrity, and your personal purity. And for me, the danger of all this is that when you understand, really understand what Jesus is on about when he describes the Christian life, it's very easy for you to look at your own Christian life and then become disillusioned with Christianity. Not because you no longer believe Christianity to be true, but because you no longer believe yourself to be capable of experiencing it, of living it. It's very easy, I think, to take a good, long, sober look at yourself in the mirror and say, well, if that's what a right life is, then I'm wrong. The fact is, I do carry around hurts and grudges. Why wouldn't I? The fact is, there are some people who the mere mention of their name makes my blood boil. I hate them, and I hate them with good reason. The fact is, sexual mistakes are a part of life. The fact is, I do condone divorce. The fact is, in business, I am sometimes a bit dishonest. I promise things I can't deliver. I pay things long after I ought to. I have no intentions of being kind to the people who were unkind to me. So when it comes to negotiating the moral and the ethical rigors of this life Jesus asks me to live, I'm a bit of a flop, ergo, why bother? Why bother? Why even try? Why pretend? Why go through the motions? And so what often happens is our inability to live the Christian life causes us to become disillusioned with Christianity and we give up. But just before we become all morose in this unit on happiness, let's notice what Jesus isn't saying. This is important because sometimes the church burdens you with stuff Jesus doesn't burden you with. Notice closely what Jesus isn't saying. In this sentence, Jesus is not talking about achievement. He's not saying, blessed are those who do live a righteous life. He's not saying, happy are they who do have it all together. He's saying the opposite. He's saying, blessed are those who hunger for and who thirst for. This is an important distinction, I think, because inherent in the concept of hunger is the idea of lack. We don't hunger for what we already have. We don't thirst for what we've already achieved. We can only hunger for what we don't have. So in this morning's lesson, Jesus is teaching us that happiness begins by being astonished, I suppose, at our lack of Christian morality. And in that astonishment, he suggests, are found the seeds of desire and happiness. The moment you realize that you're not what you should be is the moment you begin to feel the appetite to become what you're not. That sentence could translate, I suppose, into any talk in any context. Here we're talking about our faith. The moment you realize you're not what you should be, you're not what you're asked to be, is the moment you begin to feel the need to become what you're not. And that's a good moment. It's a far better place to be than to be one of those people who walks around being very pleased with how great they are. Really up themselves at their righteousness, really up themselves at their own Christianity. That, from Jesus' perspective, is a dangerous place, because it's not a place of hunger. It's not a place of reality. According to social studies, to be successful in life, you need three things. And regardless of the field you're in, without these three things, you won't be successful. You need to have ability, you need to have opportunity, and you need to have hard work. Ability, opportunity, and hard work. Without these three things, whatever it is you do, whatever it is you're trying to do, you will not be successful. The same is true with faith. To be successful in the Christian life, you need ability, you need opportunity, and you need hard work. As far as the first of those are concerned, I think it's important to always believe that you have the ability to be a better person. You as a human being always reserve the right to make better choices tomorrow than you did yesterday. It's always within your capacity to be better going forward than you were in the past. Have a look at this. This was written by a man called Peter, close friend of Jesus. Important to remember when we read these words that Peter made bad choices yesterday. Peter was a man who knew what it was to look in the mirror and say, I have messed up many times, many ways. I've done all sorts of things I shouldn't have done. I haven't always been the Christian I claim to be. Right? He says, His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness. An amazing statement. Whatever it is you need to be a person of better integrity, better purity, and better morality tomorrow than you were yesterday, in this writer's view, you have that. The seeds of improvement are within you. And it's not an innate ability, notice. He says it comes through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. So this is one of those strange parts of the Bible that talks about how lucky we are. From the perspective of this biblical writer, you didn't choose to get involved with God. God chose to get involved with you. And he gave to you this capacity to do better, to be better. Then he goes on, he says, through these he has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature and escape the corruption in the world caused by evil desires. Bleh, what does that mean? It's an honest response to some biblical sentences, I think. Bleh, what does that mean? This is Peter's way of talking about what happened on the cross. When he talks about participating in the divine nature, he's talking about this important Christian idea that on the cross some kind of transfer happened. And so his view would be to say, on the cross, God transferred all of your messed upness onto Jesus. And he then transferred all of Jesus' rightness and morality and purity and goodness onto you, onto us. And because God did that, he can say this kind of thing. You now participate in the life of Jesus. You now participate in Jesus' right life. The Bible, for that reason, talks less than you would imagine about what you should be. It more often talks about what you actually are. So the writers of the New Testament say, you are, not you should be, you are a new person. The old life that you used to live has gone. It doesn't need to go, it has gone. You are a new creation. You are a believer. The Bible talks this declarative, matter-of-fact way. And so Peter would say, you have this ability. Make no mistake about it. You have the ability to improve yourself. You have the ability to make a better life and make better choices than you hitherto have. Always believe this. Because there's a small part of you that will talk yourself down and say to you, you're always going to be screwed up. You're always going to make those mistakes. You're always going to be stuck in those habits. You're never going to get better. You can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. Don't be your own worst enemy. In addition to this ability, I think you've been given opportunity. I'm horribly biased, of course, but I think this is a pretty good church. I don't think it's it's not the best church in the world. It's probably not even all that great. In fact, it's probably slightly rubbish. Right? Actually, that's about, let's stop saying we're a great church. Let's just be honest. We are rubbish. Right, we're rubbish at church. We're rubbish. But it's still good to be here in this rubbish church. Worst church in the world. It is, isn't it? And there's something good. Far better churches to choose from. There's something good about being here, isn't there? There's something about being here. The context is, I'm here with you and you're here with me and we're here with each other. And the context is, you know what? We don't have to pretend here to be something we're not. So we can be honest and say, you know what? I'm not all that great. And I could be so much more. So much more than my choices have made me. So much more than where circumstances have currently placed me. So much more than I've settled for. And I can be what God says I already am. And I think here, in this honest place, is good for that. I think here is a good place to grow and to learn. And so I think here, for all its rubbishness and unfanciness, Tim Hortons, we're still using Tim Hortons cans for the offering. Like how cheap, how rubbish is that? It's great. I love it. I think for all of that, this is always a fantastic opportunity, a fantastic place to become more than we've settled for and become what God says we already are and what we can be. I think here's a continual reminder that there's more. There's more. There's more in you. There's more in me. So much more. Plus en vous, as my Latin teacher used to say. I hate when I do that. However, for all the... I only went to Latin because there was a girl in the class I fancied. That didn't work out, but I remembered bits. Anyway, she became a nun to escape me. None of that was true. However, for all the, all of the, and I think this is the bit. This is the bit, right? This is the bit in your relationships. This is the bit in your career. And this is the bit in your faith. This is the bit that gets you all the time. Gets me. All of the ability in the world, all of the opportunity in the world, do you no good whatsoever without hard work. There's no such thing as a successful person who doesn't work hard at what they do. And whatever the field is, whatever the area of life is, successful people have this thing. They had some innate ability, they were given an opportunity, and they grabbed it with both hands, and they went for it, and they made the most of it. The same is true in our spiritual life. Look at what Peter says next. He says, because God has given you the ability to live a right life, and because you happen to be in a situation where you have opportunity to learn more and be more than what you've settled for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and brotherly kindness and love, and so on and so forth. The word effort that he uses there is a word that means something like alongside. And so it's a word that you would use in the ancient world if you were describing what two people were doing when they were doing something together. And so when Peter chooses this word to describe the hard work and the effort that ought to characterize your faith, he is saying essentially, God has done his part. Now you jolly well go and do yours. God, for example, has made you a brand new person. Now go and be a brand new person. God has said that the old stuff in your life has gone. Now you make it gone. God has said you are a Christian. Now be one. Live like one. Act like one. And whenever I read that sort of thing, I always feel slightly shabby. Particularly because I know a little bit about this sentence. The word add that you see in that sentence, make every effort to add to your faith goodness and knowledge and so on and so forth, is such a small word in English. You almost overlook it. The mind has trained itself not to pay too much attention to the word add. However, the Greek word that Peter uses there is quite a large word, epigoregen. It's a vivid word, particularly vivid because it comes from the world of Greek drama. You know how when you go to the theatre and you see a Mervish show, and there's always, I quite like that sort of thing. There's always a point in the show where there's two people on stage, and it's all quite subdued, and there's just two people, and they're singing to one another, and so it's all slightly, I'm standing here, and I'm standing here too, and now I'm going over there. Let's go over there together, and it'll last forever, and slightly rubbish. And then there's a point in the show where there's a transition from two people going on about something. You know, the lights go up at the back of the stage, and the music picks up pace, And then the chorus joins in. And in the chorus, there aren't just two people, there's like 50, 60, 70 people. And it's all quite elaborate and quite vibrant. And what the chorus does fills the theatre with life and energy and colour. Well, in ancient Greek, the epigoregen, the ad, was the chorus. It was the spice, it was the colour, it was the loudness. And hiring all those extra singers for the chorus was ruinously expensive. And it was only ever done for the most lavish of shows. Peter uses this word. He says, epigoregen to your faith. Add to your faith. In other words, be a little bit lavish, be a little bit extravagant in how you learn more about Jesus, in how you figure out more about being a good person, in how you try to be a little bit more self-controlled, in how you pull your socks up and pay more attention to things like perseverance and so on and so forth. Dig a little deep, will you, is the point he's making. Jesus, I shouldn't talk about that, sorry. Jesus, remember, does not expect that your life will be right all the time. Jesus never anticipates this. He never anticipates that righteousness is a thing you will be always successful at. But he does expect, I think, that your lack of rightness will quite often grieve you, that you will be quite upset sometimes about how unsuccessfully Christian you sometimes are. And he expects that upsetness will lead you to a place of, there is more in me, and I can do this. I can do this. And even if I can't, I hunger for it. I want to be better. I want to do better. And I think in that wanting, at least what Jesus... I'm just telling you what Jesus is saying. I'm not sure I understand it, because it is strange. Jesus is saying that in that tension between not having and wanting, there is a happiness that is to be found. And it certainly seems to be the case that the more you cooperate with God in life, the more God cooperates with you. The more you make of the opportunities that God gives you, the further you tend to go. The more you eat, Jesus seems to be saying, the more you are filled. Well, in essence, you've understood the concepts, but I think the words are wrong. So to talk about being humble in the New Testament is slightly different from what Jesus is to talk about how you should think of yourself. So to talk about being humble is to say I should think of myself as though I am nothing. And that is a very Christian virtue. Here, I think Jesus is talking about not thinking of yourself as though you actually are nothing, but realizing that you actually are nothing. So we're not. I think what we're talking about here isn't humility, but honesty. It's about those perhaps conversations we can only have with ourselves. You know, where we look in the mirror and take stock and, you know what? Some parts of my life are going okay, and I'm tracking pretty well with my faith. But there are areas of my life that aren't. And I think this is about being honest about that. And the importance of honesty, this is true in every area of your life. You can't progress and do better without first being honest about where you actually are. Because you can't move on to better if you don't start from a place of reality, right?
All of those statements that I find my famous people.
You can always, I think, bank on me being sarcastic. Always, yeah. But I think there is value in there is value in accepting yourself too. I think we spoke about that in week 1 of the unit. It's quite important to accept. It's the same as being honest. It's important to look inside and accept yourself. That's just quite important too.
Completely the wrong thing to take away, in my opinion.
So yeah, what often happens, I think we spoke about this in week 1 of the unit, which was probably a bit psychobabbly, but I think what often happens is we become our own worst enemy in life, and that's never a good idea. So we make a mistake, or things don't go as well as we'd like them to have gone, or whatever, and this self-talk happens where no good,
Right.
never going to make it, can't do it, can't be better, can't improve. And what happens then, that just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in our lives. We persuade ourselves that we're never going to whatever. And that's just dumb. I think the importance of self-acceptance is to look inside and say, here's where I am right now. Kind of sucks.
Yep.
And it's not that great. Some of it's my fault, some of it's not my fault. But this is just the reality. And the importance of reality is that Jesus deals with the reality of our lives, not the fantasy of our lives. Not where we would like to be, but where we actually are. And I think when you get your head around the reality of your situation, you can then begin to make steps moving forward. But it's just hugely important in life not to be your own worst enemy. Right? Just stop it. Stop talking yourself down. It's a command. Let me check my clock before I. Okay, Mark, one more. Whoa, where are you coming from? What is wrong with you? It's not just a thought. Were you even listening? What is that? Were you on your iPad this morning? Are you on drugs? Don't come to church high. Okay, so, all right. My goodness, right, okay, so, the Bible, no seriously, the Bible comes from cultures long time ago and foreign to our own. So it's quite unfair and not really cricket to judge an ancient book by modern standards. So yes, you're right. Parts of the Bible, if you read them in a certain way, do seem slightly misogynistic. They were written in a man's world, etc., etc., etc. That said, the Bible for its time is extraordinarily progressive. And so it's no... what I mean by that is the Bible within its culture says things that no other books are saying within their culture. The Bible within its culture is advocating, in the case of women, a place in the life of the society that no others are. The Bible offers to women a protection and a dignity that simply isn't in its surrounding culture. And it's for that reason that the Bible I think this is true of almost every leap forward in social progression. The Bible has been the inspiration. Take slavery as an example. You could, if you were an idiot, and there are many religious idiots in the world, we know this sadly to be true, if you were an idiot and you read the Bible, you could say, the Bible condones slavery. Slavery is cool in the Bible. Because the Bible never comes out and says, slavery, bad idea. And yet, the people who are at the forefront of the anti-slavery movement, centuries ago, took their inspiration from Scripture. So there is this, it's a progressive interpretation, I suppose, of the Bible. On the one hand, it's a book bound within its culture, but the interpretation of that book and the inspiration that book gives is very progressive, I think, and extends far beyond its culture. That was a horrible question. Thank you. We bow our heads before you, our loving Judge. our forgiving Saviour, our merciful Master. And we bring before you all the things that are on our mind this morning. Ourselves, our parents, our children, our careers, our finances, our health. We share these thoughts with you. We ask for your help, for your understanding, for your grace. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen.